I literally flew up the stairs, jumping 3 steps at a time from the emotions bursting out of me. I couldn't even get the key in the door the first time. Christina was getting dressed in the hallway and jumped back when I flew into the apartment. Everything worked out. I grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her a little. Imagine, everything worked out. I have passed all the selection stages. They have just sent me an order. I am being sent to the 4th star pilot from Russia. Christina freed herself and, moving away from me to the closet, sat down on a chair. There was no joy on her face. So, you're leaving now? What is it? She asked rather coldly. For how long? I squatted down next to her and took her hands in mine. Previous expeditions took about 8 months. I think ours will be the same in time. Can you imagine what kind of competition there was for this place? I still can't believe it. Look, it seems to me that it's time for you to grow up. Christina pulled out her hands and stood up. We had plans, remember? Your father is ill and your mother needs support. Do you really want to leave us all, right now? Somewhere deep inside me, a red warning light should have come on, but I was so besotted with the possibilities that no signals penetrated through this joy. It's only for 8 months. I will be able to see not only the sandbox of the solar system, but also to go out into outer space. Imagine, only 3 expeditions, only 6 pilots from all over the world have been in deep space so far. I see what you can do. She reached into the closet for her coat. And what can we do? Stop living and wait a year until you come back? You proposed to me, remember? We're supposed to have a wedding at the end of August. I wanted to help her put on her coat, but she quickly put it on herself. You must understand, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They do not refuse such opportunities. I'll come back and we'll get married right away. Are you sure? She arched her eyebrows in genuine surprise, then picked up her bag and left the apartment. I stared at the slammed door for a while longer. Resentment struggled with regret, but I dispersed them to the corners. There is no time. On the weekend, we'll go out to some cozy restaurant and calmly discuss plans over a glass of wine. In the meantime, we need to fly to Kaluga in time for a meeting with the crew and an initial briefing, then return back to undergo pre-flight training. For the first meeting, the Russian part of the crew of the 4th star was gathered in the Great Hall of the Kaluga Mission Control Center. Besides me, there was a doctor from Moscow, as well as physicists and specialists in ship engines who flew in from Novosibirsk, Akademgorodok. From the hall, we joined a video conference, which was already attended by the entire crew. The team from China was numerous and mainly consisted of multidisciplinary technical specialists. The teams also included England, France, and Japan, and 1 or 2 people from other countries. I stared at the faces, trying to memorize the names and profiles. After the conference, we moved to the local buffet, which was spacious and bright with large windows and bright napkins on the tables. We decided to have a snack and get to know each other better at the same time. Wow, the pilot! Victor looked at me curiously. That's lucky. You had a hell of a competition. Well, the doctors were also sifted out. Be healthy. I held out my hand for a handshake. No! Victor suddenly looked confused. I did not participate in the competition. I was just appointed without going through the competitive procedures. How's that? One of the Novosibirsk physicists sat down next to us. We all had a competition. I don't know. Victor spread his hands. But it's ridiculous to refuse, so I'm with you. Although it's all very strange. We chuckled. A special mobile application was developed for the expedition participants. Through it, you could view the training schedule, colleagues' contacts, and professional category chats directly on your phone. Sitting on a high-speed train, I leafed through the composition of the expedition and was surprised to find that in addition to physicists, astronomers, and biologists, a group of linguists was also flying with us. Adrenaline surged into my blood, and I almost jumped on the spot. Previous expeditions did not land on planets. The first stellar confirmed the presence of 2 planets, Proxima B and Proxima C. It recorded general information, atmospheric compositions, temperature maps, and took pictures of the surface. Later, the planets were given more appropriate names. Proxima B was renamed Bienor, Proxima C was renamed Zilar. The second expedition discovered a developed biosphere on Bienor, but did not land. Maybe the linguists on our expedition mean that we plan to establish contact with the inhabitants of the planet for the first time? Christina met me at the train station, gloomy and focused. She was silent all the way in the car, but when we parked at the house, she waved her hand in the direction of the square. We walked along the narrow alley in silence for a while, then she sighed, looking away. We need to talk, Lech. I understand that nothing can be changed and I should probably be happy about your success, but understand me too. We've known each other for almost 5 years, and I've been waiting for you all this time. First you graduated from the academy, then you gained flight hours. You flew all over the solar system. Now you're on an expedition. My life goes by. I wait year after year for it to fully begin. But nothing changes, and time slips away like sand through my fingers. I love you very much, but let's make a deal. This expedition is my last expectation. Either you come back to me after 8 months, or you continue to build your career without me. I hugged her and kissed her. I'm coming back to you. I promise. Proxima Centauri zoomed in on the screen, turning from a dot first into a spot and then into a scarlet disk with a crown of prominences. I even held my breath, peering at her approach. We were on our way to the Lagrange point between the star and its first planet, Bienor. We will drop several probes there and then move into orbit around the planet, where we will stay for a long time. It's amazing to be the main pilot of a ship on such an expedition. Barely touching the dashboard, hardly breathing, I carefully brought the ship to the coordinates marked by the computer on the screen. All for the sake of this view, right, Alexei? Leona Ducret, a linguist from the French part of the expedition, looked into the control room and froze, looking at the screens. In my opinion, the view is worth more than 2 months of flight. I smiled, looking back. Attention! The captain's voice came over the speaker. Pre-final readiness has been announced. Block the pilot house. All crew members take their seats. Prepare to launch the S-28 probe. I heard the soft click of the airlock closing, and I focused on the instruments. It is enough to turn off the speed at the desired point failed. I added a little thrust to the planetary engines and began to look carefully at the navigation screen, trying to drive the outline of the ship into the center of the marked area. Suddenly, the ship shook. It vibrated slightly and unpleasantly. It even seemed to me that I could see the vibration with the naked eye. The contours of the objects blurred for a second, and then smoothly tightened to their normal state. This, of course, is impossible. Apparently, the impact has blurred my vision. I rubbed my eyes. The ship's transmitter was activated. What was that? Judging by the voice, the question was asked by Riley Evans, the technologist of the British part of the expedition. Unless, of course, I was mistaken, we didn't communicate much with him. There was no collision, and the sensors do not register any objects near the ship. Then what? The airlock hatch of the control room beeped and slid aside. The captain and the leader of the Chinese team, Wu Zhou, entered the doorway. I don't know. I nodded towards the backup screen, where I started replaying the recording from the cameras and sensors. Wu Ru stared intently at the image, stopped and restarted the replay a couple of times, then shrugged and turned to us. There really is nothing, although at the moment of impact, the picture from all cameras disappears, for a split second. This is strange, but there were no objects near the ship, and the hull was also intact. And the engines were running smoothly. It wasn't a random pulse. Yes, it's strange. Release the probes around the ship. Maybe they can see something. The captain nodded at me and left. I'll take care of the probes. Is Riley with me? Wu Ru paused at the screen and paused playback right before the camera image disappeared. Look, Alexei, how the ripples passed through the stars. I'm going to the launch area, Riley replied into his communicator. See? Wu Ru nodded at the screens, but I didn't notice anything special, the usual image compression flaw. Nothing else interesting happened that day. Everything was clear in the data from the probes, as well as in the readings from the ship's sensors, and we eventually decided to move towards Bienor. The real work has already begun for the planet. A large laboratory was deconservated and launched. It was divided into several sectors, each of which housed equipment for its own type of research. To the left of the entrance hung huge monitors, which dynamically displayed data on experiments in the active phase. Of course, there was nothing for non-researchers to do there. But the ship was now fully powered by automation, which was monitored by a reserve Filipino pilot, and my feet brought me to the laboratory on their own. I watched the fuss at the instruments, caught snatches of multilingual conversations, absorbed this atmosphere of passion for knowledge. Alexei, Leona called out to me from somewhere deep in the laboratory. Come here. Look, our system is not starting up, and it will only be connected to Earth in a few hours. I barely managed to hide my grin, sat down at her workplace, found an uninstalled package from the archive, deployed and launched the interface of the linguistic database. What is it? A dictionary? I was looking at the speakers on the screen. Leona burst out laughing, looking at me. Well, what else can you think about linguists, right, Alexei? She took the keyboard away from me. By the way, it's all math. This program can divide samples of any language into phonemes, combine them into contextual groups, and compare them with the closest groups of any of the terrestrial languages. And if the local speech is not audible, will your program cope? We are not really counting on the locals yet, although of course if the probes can catch something interesting for us, we will study and analyze it. But our main goal is to study the crew. This is the most multinational project that exists on Earth, and we are exploring the transformation of languages when working together. While I was trying to understand what was said, Wu Zhou came up to us, surrounded by several of his colleagues. "Oh, are you free?" Wu was delighted. "We have now sent several probes to the upper atmosphere. They are merging data into a common database. Let's go set up processing and output of graphs." "Are you sure you're a pilot?" Leona moved away, letting me stand up. "The pilot?" I smiled. "It's just that our pilots only get to have a good mathematical base, and I also have a second specialization in programming, so I won't be bored." "Leona." Wu nodded at her. "Leo, that's what they usually call me. Thank you for your help." She stared after us for a few seconds, then returned to work. "I feel strange." Xavier Bouchard, a weather analyst from the French part of the expedition, complained the next day. "There doesn't seem to be a reason to go to the doctor. I'm just confused. I can't concentrate." We were sitting in the recreation area and drinking tea from fireproof cuvettes that looked like bowls, borrowed from a biological laboratory. Wu Ru shot Xavier a quick glance and shrugged his shoulders. "In a space expedition, you should not ignore the strange. The clinics on Earth are 4 light years away, and we need to not only return, but also do everything that we have planned. So it is better to solve any problems before they grow from small to large." "What am I going to say?" Xavier smiled awkwardly. "I hear rustling and I can't focus on the numbers." "Do you hear any rustling?" Wu Ru stood up. "Well, that's a symptom. Let's go to the medical unit." I put the ditch aside and stood up too. A few more people from the French group followed me up. As a result, we came to the medical unit in a noisy crowd. Xavier was put through an MRI scan. Following the results of the diagnosis, the program produced cheerful green graphs of the condition. Xavier was absolutely healthy. Overwork? Akihiro, the chief physician of the expedition, reviewed all the data and the final conclusion once again. "Does your head hurt?" Xavier shivered. "It's just a strange condition. I thought it was nothing." "I'll give you a sleeping pill now. You'll get a good night's sleep and tomorrow, you'll be as good as new." Akihiro took out a blister of pills from the locker, squeezed one tablet into a dispenser jar, and handed it to Xavier. "Come back tomorrow. If it doesn't get better, we'll think about what else we can do." Xavier nodded, put the jar in his pocket, and quickly retreated. Wu and I lingered in the hallway, watching him go. "I don't like this," the Chinese man said softly. "They didn't find anything." "It's all right." I waved my hand nonchalantly. The next day, Xavier looked even more tired and haggard. He confessed that now his head ached and sensory hallucinations appeared. In addition to rustling, he began to feel touches, temperature changes, and a puff of air in places where absolutely nothing of the kind could be. Akihiro was alarmed. I did a few more examinations, but the charts of the condition still remained in the green zone. The medical equipment did not find any problems. The weather analyst needs the weather, which is not on the ship. The body makes it up on its own. Leo joked when we discussed what was happening in a whisper that evening. The captain conducted a health survey among the entire crew through the mobile application, and it turned out that Xavier wasn't the only one with problems. Of the 78 members of the expedition, 14 confirmed that they had similar symptoms. I downloaded the logs of previous flights and looked at the recordings carefully. There was nothing like our case. After flipping through the files twice, I decided to go down to the main lab. The readings from the probes were collected there. Maybe they had dug up something over the past day. In the laboratory, I found Xavier with my eyes. He listlessly scrolled through the Bienor atmospheric data collected by previous expeditions. The thought came that he should be sent back to the medical unit. While I was thinking about this, Wu Zhou came out to meet me. "I have processed the data from the probes for the entire duration of their operation, but I still do not see any anomalies. It was suspected that a short photospheric flare had penetrated our radiation protection, but the sensors would have detected it, and there is no residual radiation." Wu nodded towards Xavier, "and he should be in the medical unit." Suddenly, Xavier gave a strange jerk, stood up and looked around hungrily. Wu and I took this as a command to act and moved towards him. Suddenly, he screamed. Loud, shrill, like the last time. And right before our eyes, it began to change. The facial features were erased, the skin disappeared somewhere, and muscles and bones appeared on the surface instead. The laboratory was filled with screams of terror. "Don't touch him." Wu stopped my hand. "The doctor is urgently in the main laboratory," he said into the communicator. The flickering of the body ended and Xavier, or rather, what was left of him, sank like a sack to the floor. "Everyone disperse." Evans and the captain were making their way towards us. I turned away. I wanted to move away. but Wuzhou grabbed my arm. You saw what was happening well. We need to record everything and verify our data. He nodded towards the camera. Let's talk among ourselves under the video so that we don't miss anything. What is it? Akihiro and Victor froze at the table. Riley, get the people out of the lab. The captain pointed at the horrified scientists. Akihiro bent over the body. In the survey, several other people said they felt bad. We need to isolate them all in the medical unit. I looked at Victor. Yes, do it. The captain also nodded to him. Victor waited for Akihiro's confirmation and quickly left. Akihiro straightened up. I do not know what it is. He nodded at the body. And how it is. In the morning, I found out from the application that 2 more people died the same way as Xavier. The ship was moving around the planet, but no one else was engaged in research. The captain ordered everyone to stay in their cabins, making an exception only for the medical team and the pilots. The medics settled down in the infirmary with the patients, and the co-pilot and I locked ourselves in the control room. They haven't answered anything intelligible about our situation from Earth yet either. Idly, I brought up the readings of all the body sensors of the expedition members on one screen. Now, even without roll call, we have seen whether people are alive or not. The deaths continued. I found myself listening to my body rather hysterically and looking for signs of decay. That's what we called what was happening to people. Disintegration. On the second day, Akihiro succumbed to Victor's persuasion. He offered to make a mixture of psychotropic drugs, although he could not clearly explain how they could help in the current situation. Suddenly, the combination of sedatives made the patients feel better. The hallucinations had almost stopped, and the headache was gone, although there were no painkillers in the mixture. But despite all these efforts, people continued to die. I was sitting in the control room, and to take my time, I was plotting routes to the ground in the simulator, when ship-to-ship communications turned on. Colleagues, the captain's voice carried throughout the ship. We are returning to Earth. The Earth has agreed to receive us, and not just in a septic tank in orbit, but we are allowed to land. There is a scientific base in the south of Western Siberia, which is being vacated for us now. It is still unknown how long we will be in isolation. We will be released only by the decision of a special commission, which will have to confirm that we are safe for the rest of the world's population. In order not to provoke panic, information about the breakup is now closed. We do not provide any details to our relatives. I looked at the simulator and quickly erased all the routes so that no one would see the ornate routes across half the galaxy. Victor came to see me the next morning. Think about it. Akihiro has chosen the dosages of medicines so that now our compote of tranquilizers completely stops decay. True, success only happened after the 12th death, but now our chances of reaching Earth alive have greatly increased. He showed a video in which, at the beginning of the collapse, one of the expedition members was injected, and the process stopped literally before his eyes. The organs that had shifted by that time did not return to their place, but there was no further development of the disintegration. How did you figure out that you need to mix tranquilizers? I looked at Victor in surprise. I had some information. He smiled sheepishly. Hypothetical, not exact. I'm glad you helped. To inform about the health status of the crew, a separate section was created in the mobile application, where Akihiro now regularly posted news about breakups and the condition of the sick. The mixture helped. The deaths stopped. When the ship was on course, I had free time, and Wuzhou and I began to do monitoring, with which we could quickly track the beginning of the disintegration of the expedition members. The doctors have compiled a list of parameters that need to be monitored. Wu was going to make a bracelet to track the state of the body, and I was wearing the software part of the controller. After a few weeks, all the crew members were dressed up in our bracelets. Everyone had a syringe with medicine with them, and everyone knew what to do to save their lives or the person nearby. Autumn. That's what was waiting for us on Earth. Cold rain. Fallen leaves. The buildings of the old laboratories, hastily restored for our arrival, a park drowned in autumn, mourned by cold rain, strewn with fallen leaves. And there was loneliness waiting for us. Me, for sure. Do you remember what we agreed on? Christina asked heavily into the phone. I won't wait any longer. You had a choice. You could have stayed with me. Do you understand? Her voice still sounded in my ears. And the worried voice of his mother, who informed him that his father had been admitted to the hospital with a heart attack. I was drowning in this autumn. Instead of a big space. Instead of stars. New discoveries. Instead of the romance of new routes. I only had her, a rainy, gloomy, cold autumn.